Yeah, there we go. Okay, let's go ahead and get started with the work session so we can work through that. We've got our special meeting that will start after the work session's done. So Dr. Gay, I'll turn it over.
Begin with the plan in mind. So the plan is, Aiden is on deck to walk you through the institutional efficiency data book that he sent out, answer any questions you have. Then we will give you a brief budget update that is framed by what we don't know at the legislature quite yet, but we should know by tomorrow. And we'll just tell you what, if anything, has changed in the budget draft that you saw in February, and the short answer is not much. And then it will be time to adjourn the work session. I've called the special board meeting to order, so you can go into executive session to review with Angela Hobart, who assume the questions that you would like to pose to our candidates who will be here next week. So does that sound like a reasonable plan to everyone?
Sounds good.
Okay, always good to have a plan. So that said, Dr. Aiden Dunleavy, you are up. Walk us through the efficiency data, if you please. With no yawn. Sorry, it's a month.
Yeah, that was me already.
Copy. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Is that too much?
Do they really?
Nope, not that last. No, I'd go back to what it was. I'd go back to what it was before.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's.
There. That worked.
All right, thank you. So hopefully you've all had a chance to at least glance at the institutional efficiency data book. This is an attempt to answer a lot of the questions that have been raised in some of the prior meetings. And I wanted to kind of outline what we'll cover. So I wanted to, in the first two sections, just provide some context and some foundational data around some of our expenses and headcount as they relate to building efficiency metrics. And then get into some of the key metrics that we think are important for our institution to track. So starting out on page 3, we're looking at compensation data. And again, this is for similar to what we did in the last book. Yes,
Can you blow it up any bigger? I'm sorry.
I
Nate.
can. Yes.
I did get new glasses, but still fuzzy. Thank you.
Yes. And not all the table is going to fit on the screen at one time.
Sure.
So similar to the last book that we reviewed in the February meeting, looking at longitudinal views of most of this data, and where appropriate, we have comparisons to Kansas Community College averages as well as WSU Tech. So what we see here is a 5-year span of our salary and wage cost as broken out by several different functional classifications. So this is information that the finance team produces and publishes to iPads annually. So we can see that, and we'll get to this in the next table too, roughly half of our salary and wage expense comes from instruction. So that's full-time and part-time instructors or adjuncts. And then we have a variety of other expenses for academic support. So just for context, since those categories might not be overly meaningful, academic support includes roles such as librarians and academic administration, deans and whatnot. Student services includes admissions, registrars, and athletics, for example. Institutional support includes general admin, finance, HR, and marketing as example. And auxiliary as example includes residence halls, cafeteria, and student union. So we can see over this 4-year period, we've actually done a pretty reasonable job of holding instruction cost to minimal increases. The 4-year change has been 4.4% during that time period. So some of those, the components that go into that are changes in the number of faculty that we have in those lines, as well as the mix of faculty, new, experienced, and the salary raises. And then fringe benefits has been reasonably steady as well. $6 to $7 million per year. We have had a few shifts in institutional support and auxiliary expenses that are just important to note. Institutional support, we've had some new roles that have been added in recent years. So as example, and then auxiliary services, one key thing to note there is the expenses dropped there because of the closure of the Educare Center a couple years ago. So in comparing these two averages from Kansas Community Colleges and WSU Tech, we see that on average, our salary and wages are about 41% of our total expenses in any given year. It's pretty close to the Kansas Community College average, a little bit higher than that. WSU Tech, theirs is considerably higher at 46% of their total expenses. From the fringe side, we are almost block and step with the community college average, 10.2% of our budget versus 9.9%. And WSU Tech spends a little bit more on fringe benefits than we do. And again, fringe is going to include things like payroll taxes, things like that. Any questions on this contextual data?
I just wanted to ask you again, WS Tech, they pay more on fringe benefits.
Yes, in aggregate. In aggregate.
All right, thank you.
Did we know what their, or have a breakdown on their total budget or budget per pupil type of? Yeah, I know they charge more than we do, but it's, they generate more revenue and pay a higher percent of revenue to their teachers.
Yes, and so further on in this booklet, we do have some information that gets to expense by student or by credit hour for different colleges. So we'll see that. Looking at our second section here, this is really the same information, but really normalizing it from a relative perspective, how much of an institution's budget is spent on these certain categories. So this gives us a better perspective to compare Butler, which is the second largest of the community colleges, some of the smaller ones. So again, on average, about half of our budget is spent on instruction. 20%, just under that, is on student services and institutional support, et cetera. And we can see those comparisons to the Kansas Community College averages there. Some similarities there. We spend a little bit more on student services than the community college average, and a little bit more on instruction than they do. Other community colleges on average might spend a little bit more on academic support. Just some context there for how we are spending our funds. Any questions there?
Just for clarification, you're averaging 19 community colleges.
Correct.
And seeing where we, even though we're second largest, comparing us, even though.
So, and this is from a relative perspective. So if I were to take Barton, for example, they would spend 40% of their budget, whatever that number is, on instruction. So as we think about salaries, one of the things that I think is important is to look at salaries for faculty. So on average, Butler Community College's faculty salary has grown from $56,000 per year in 2020 to $58,000 in 2024, about a 5% increase over that 4-year period. This puts us at the 5th highest cost, so to speak, of the 19 community colleges. The Kansas Community College average is just about $3,000, $2,500 less than that, but has grown at a more significant pace. And WSU Tech, their pay for full-time faculty is considerably lower than us or the Kansas Community College averages. Comparing that to what I would say are kind of the quality that you get for the faculty. So we're paying at a rate that's about the 5th highest in the Kansas Community College area, but we've got the 4th highest master's degree qualifications of all the faculty in the area, and the 6th highest doctoral qualifications of all the faculty in the area. So in a sense, you're getting higher quality faculty than the average in terms of their academic qualifications. But I also assert that you might have competition for pay in our market that you might not have in other areas and things like that. But just for context on what our faculty are getting paid and how well qualified they are. Any questions on those tables? Okay. So moving on to the next section, this is a look at headcount and how that has changed over time. And in these sections, headcount is broken out by occupational category. This is a little different than the functional category we had before. So I'll provide some context for that as well. When we're talking about FTE staff, what that is it going to be all of your full-time staff members plus part-time staff members at a 1/3 rate. So every 3 part-time staff members equals 1 full-time staff member. So just for context there. So we can see we have dropped off the number of total full-time equivalent staff that we've had at Butler from 2020 to 2024. We are being the second largest enrollment institution. We're also the second largest on average staffed institution of the Kansas community colleges. So kind of in line with what you would expect. We have had the largest changes, drop, so to speak, in instructional FTE staff. So from FY20, we had 259 instructional FTE to this year, which was just published. I won't have comparative data for that, but this year we have 216 FTE. So there's a couple of components that go into that. I'll talk about that more later. But we can see that that has trended down, and it's trended kind of in line with, to an extent, our student enrollment, but also some of the efficiencies that we've tried to generate in more recent cycles. And then you can see by some of the other categories. So just give you perspective on some of the other categories. Librarians, student and academic affairs, obviously includes librarians, academic directors, financial aid department. Management would include cabinet, academic deans, different program directors. Business and finance would include accounting and HR staff. Community, legal, arts and media would include enrollment coaches, admissions, athletic coaches, marketing, BCTV. Information services would be all of your IT related positions. Healthcare would be athletic trainers and health services. Service would be police, custodial, and residence life employees. Sales is bookstore and workforce education personnel. And then office and admin is admins, analysts, and office specialists. So you can kind of see how some of those different areas have remained fairly constant, just a few changes in headcount from year to year. Others have had some specific drops. Others have had a few intentional gains. One thing to note here is that this will not take into account any open positions we might have at time of reporting this. This would just be people on the payroll. So for example, if we have 5 open instructors right now, they would not be included in the number that might have gotten reported to IVEDS. So any questions on that data or some of the specific rankings?
I do on the legal arts and media, is that taking into account who all my coaches and whatnot? It's
Legal arts and
30%
media.
increase for this current year
Yes,
for our average.
yes. So that 54 would include that. Yes. Any other questions? Okay. So next table, again, similar to the first section, just looking at this on a percentage basis of overall headcount. So we can see on average, just under half of our headcount are in the instructional space. And that's kind of what you would expect and hope for out of a higher ed institution. Those are the people in the classroom. We want to have most of our employees there. Looking at some of the rankings by some of the smaller populated areas, management, legal arts, media, service, office support, maintenance. You can see we do rank in the bottom half of those different categories. So there's a smaller percentage of our employees that fit those categories when compared to our other institutions. So hopefully it speaks to some economies of scale and some efficiencies we've generated in staffing these positions. And then again, you can compare that to community college averages in the bottom half of that table. Any questions on that data? Okay. Last table in the headcount section, and this is just looking at some raw faculty numbers. So looking at the number of faculty we have from a full-time perspective over the 5-year period with the most recent year added in there, the number of part-time faculty, and then the total faculty there. one point to note there, we have had a drop in full-time faculty, but we've also had a more precipitous drop in the usage of part-time faculty. So again, as I'll speak to a little bit more later on, as enrollment patterns have changed, so have the number of teachers that we have employed to support those students. Looking at,
Doctor, so on
Yes.
part-time faculty, does that include adjunct?
yes, that is adjuncts.
Thank you.
Yes. So looking at the fourth subsection here, part-time to full-time faculty ratio. So this is really a ratio of how we are staffing our classrooms overall. So on average, we have had 2 part-time faculty for every full-time faculty that we employ. That has dropped in the recent 2 years, this year being 1.6, last year being 1.5. So it just indicates a preference and our ability to use full-time versus part-time faculty. That is very similar in recent years to the Kansas Community College average. Interestingly, WSU Tech is a lot higher. They have about 3 adjuncts for every full-time faculty member in their programs. So just a difference in staffing philosophies there. You can-
So if I may interject, it's also an issue of our master agreement. And for the master agreement, if we are going to decrease the number of faculty, we must start with the adjuncts.
You scroll up just a smidge.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
And then lastly, full-time equivalent faculty. So again, this is calculating every full-time faculty member plus 1/3 of every part-time faculty member within a year. And you can see that that has trended down for the most part each year. But again, this is a combination of us being efficient and managing to the enrollment, as well as also making some other efficiency decisions in what we do. But for the most part, we're about ranked second in all of the categories for comparison to Kansas Community Colleges. So moving on to some efficiency metrics. I will jump down to the bottom of this particular table. So this is student faculty ratio, and this is made up of 2 components above it, the full-time equivalent students and the full-time equivalent faculty. So again, with these full-time equivalents, here we're looking at all full-time students and all full-time faculty, plus 1/3 of their part-time counterparts. A couple things to note in the student faculty ratio, compared to our 19 community college set, we are 6th highest. So the higher the number, the more efficient, so to speak, we become in managing our ratio of students to faculty. Our student faculty ratio has remained relatively constant throughout this 5-year period, 18 or 17 to 1 over that time period. You compare that to Kansas Community College average, it's about 16 to 1. So we're staffing 2 more students, we're putting 2 more students in the classroom than the average in our set is. And WSU Tech, we're putting 3 more students into a classroom versus that. Any questions on that?
And is that one that's typically, you mentioned it as efficiency. I'm thinking of it from the standpoint of, is someone going to be critical that your quality of learning is better with a lower student to faculty ratio than, I mean, do we have an opinion one way or the other as to which is a better way to look at it? Or is that just where you can argue either way, depending on what you want to focus on?
Depending on your lens, you can argue either way. My perspective is great teaching is great teaching. And so whether you have 15 students in the class or 18, 3 extra students is not going to make the difference, but that's the world according to BM.
I think from a marketing perspective, most of the time, comparing us to what the class sizes are at WSU University, that they get more personalized at 18:1 versus 50:1 in the university setting.
That's, when I think of the ratio, that's the context that I normally hear it, is you want a lower ratio because it suggests a better, but I understand where you're coming from here. It does suggest that we can provide a quality education with, for more students per faculty than otherwise. So,
I also look at it that WSU Tech may not be offering as many degreed program supportive classes. So you have more technical classes, and those classes may be limited in number like our welding program or our auto mechanics program or things like that. So, so you have that in there also that they may be only offering 15 slots or 16 slots,
It's a fair point.
you know,
Does
that's
this,
their higher cost.
does this number also include online?
Yes, it would.
So it's not 18 to 1 physical students in seats necessarily. It could be 12 and
Just
6 or-
in overall in the institution, it would include online and on ground. Yes.
But physically, they're probably could be smaller than that.
And very correct me if I misspeak, as I want you to, but I believe in our master agreement of quote, use human rights here, have a limit on the number of students in an online class, so it would have 50 in an online class, is that still that?
Yes, ma'am.
The in-person classes usually, are capped at 25. So in somewhere between 10 and 25 is where we want to be. So it's.
We are setting close to 50% online. Right? More or
Yes.
less, it's 49 and change. I remember seeing the
Correct.
number a couple
Yeah.
years ago.
That's right.
I think we also have to consider what that is when we say online enrollment in comparison face to face. And I don't have data, but if you want to look at it, many of our students take 2 or 3 face-to-face classes and augment with an online plan. So we can't say that here's our online enrollment and these students are strictly online.
My son does that. He has a chance he can either be physical or catch it online. But I know our online was growing 10%, I think, last year compared to everything else. So it's the highest growing rate.
Yeah, so I would feel very comfortable about these metrics. It shows, I think, a good classroom size for teaching and learning. Big enough that you can benefit from other students in the classroom, but not so big that you can't actually have good interaction with your instructor.
It's actually not, I actually have the data. 43.6% of our enrollment comes from our online.
Any other questions on student faculty ratio? Okay. So the next 2 sections, these are very similar, just provided through different lenses. So this is an attempt to look at overall expenses per year. And in this table, allocate that to a full-time equivalent student. So taking all of our credit hours that are taught in a given year and dividing that by 30, and that equals a full-time equivalent student. So we can see in the very top section of our table, this is our 12-month FTE enrollment. Right below that is the total expenses, actual expenses we had for a year. So taking that, we break that out by the different functional categories, and we can see, for instruction, this is what we pay per year per student overall. For an FTE student, we would pay $14.9 thousand to educate that student. And with instruction is 4.7 thousand of that. If you compare that to the Kansas Community College averages, they pay on average over this period $18.6 thousand to educate each student. So financially, that is about a $4,000 favorability variance in our favor. We're doing this at a $4,000 cheaper cost than they are. And you can see at the different functional breakouts where we might have some significant gains relative to the averages. Looking at the next table, this is the same information, but on a per credit hour basis. So this is perhaps more intuitive. We can see that over the 5-year average period, it cost us $495 per credit hour to educate a student. And we can see the breakout of how much per functional category. The community college average is $621. So about $126 per credit hour favorable variance for us. And you can see in the middle of the section here, the breakout of how much of that would be attributable to changes in expense versus how much would be attributable to changes in credit hour activity.
We charge 100 or 130 per credit hour, and it costs us 500 per credit.
Correct. Any other questions on these cost measures? So all in all, like, again, from kind of a cost efficiency perspective, those lower numbers here on the expense per credit hour are better, indicating that we do these functions and services cheaper than our peers. Moving into next table, this is specifically looking at class size enrollment. So this would be related to student faculty ratios, but this is looking at the actual size of different enrollment sections. We can see, and I've got this broken out by different section sizes. So 1 to 5 students in a section, 6 to 10 in a section, et cetera. A couple of things that I'll point out here. For fall of 2021, 22, and 23, the average class size enrollment was about 13.5 students per section, remained relatively constant during that time period. You can see that 11 to 12% of our students were in classes of 1 to 5. Moving into fall of 2024, we've certainly had some concerted efforts. I'll point out Dr. Robinson and his efforts there to try and change that mix. So to be more efficient in how we are offering classes, how many students we are putting in a section before we open up a new section. And you can see a couple of things come from that data. We have increased our average class size from 13.6 in fall 23 to 15.2 in last fall. We've gone from 12.5% of our students in a class of 1 to 5 kiddos to now 7.6. So that mix has shifted considerably, moving from those very small classes to those medium and more manageable, appropriate size classes. I will say some of these classes would be defined really to be those smaller type interaction points. If you have fine arts, for example, as you get into upper level coursework. So you wouldn't necessarily target this getting down to 0, but certainly some good moves here to get more efficient classroom schedules.
In the past, there's been some explanation for that, but in some, I think it was fine arts was an example, you might have 2 different ceramics classes that have small numbers that are taught concurrently at the same time. Would those show up in that as 2 separate, would that show up as 1 class of 8, or would it show up as 2 separate classes of 4?
If they're taught concurrently in different sections,
Same
yes,
time,
they would.
same time slot, but just two
Courses.
courses being taught in the same space by the same instructor at the same time.
So that would, so that would be, if they were actually 2 physical locations, that would make sense to include them that way. If they were a cross-listed course, for example, that might be just a limitation in the data that we capture.
And I'm not critical, I understand where those would the 7.6 number actually be even lower, but for the fact that we're aggregating, or if we're not aggregating those classes.
Any other questions on class size? Moving on into last page of data. Top section, table 4E, just highlighting some of the programs that we are currently teaching out. We've got 5 of them that are in, teach out status right now. And then we have 2 that were also recently eliminated within the 5-year period in question. So these are programs that we've gone through internal review, looking at our enrollment, and then as well as external review, what does the market say about the viability of this program? And we've made the decision for one reason or another to eliminate this program. And this will be offset by any program additions we might have to replace this, or unrelated to this, but to add to our mix. Any questions on the program reductions? Okay. And lastly, we have position reductions over FY22 through planned reductions for this year. You can see the number of positions that we have eliminated by functional category. Part-time positions are in here as a half of a position. So we can see the total number of positions as well as the annual salary for that grouped position within a year. So just kind of some perspective on positions that, again, we have deemed are no longer necessary for the institution. This does not preclude the option for us to add positions outside of this, but this is where we've made an intentional effort not to refill a position.
Correct, that is not.
Correct.
So that salary that you see there, if you add another 40% to that, we'll put it in furniture. That's taxes, insurance, those type of things. So actually, it's quite a bit more money that is saved So,
Any questions on that? I'll just briefly touch on it, but we won't necessarily go into it. The appendix does provide descriptions of those functional classifications that I gave examples of. It provides descriptions of the occupational categories that I gave some examples of. And then there are 3 data tables that provide some more detailed comparison data. So FTEs, 12-month FTEs for all of the Kansas community colleges. So you can see how everyone else has trended over that time period. You can see our rank versus others. And you can see percentage changes with each school and compare that to the average. We do have the Kansas Community College total, average, and median in here, as well as WSU Tech numbers. And then a very similar table for the number of credit hours. So every community college in Kansas, average, medians, totals, and then WSU Tech. And then lastly, looking at that detailed expense per credit hour for all of those institutions, Kansas Community College average and median, and WSU Tech. Any questions on anything else from within the data book? Thank you for putting this together.
Well, the plan is to continue to add data each year, so you will move the longer term overview of both the efficiencies as well as the comparative data.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Wayne.
Is it right? It seems like Johnson County. Whoa, hey, sorry. You're good. Oh, wait, and Kansas City are almost a third of all community college hours taught, like 30.
I have it from ACK and next, but Johnson County, there is a significant gap between Johnson enrollment and the rest of the community colleges. And Layton gives you factual data.
Right.
My recollection is ACKCC falls about 3rd or 4th in terms of community college enrollment.
Just saw it somewhere. Oh, here it was. It's on
I know
page
it's-
seventeen.
I think Hutch is 3rd and KCK is 4th.
Yeah.
Which it Shelby is a little bit surprising given its ACK's position in the metropolitan area.
When we're averaging community colleges, they're absolutely a third of all the average. Is just up there, kind of. I skew how we look at things, but you're comparing ourselves to everyone else besides those.
And Barton here to, I'm not sure if they still are, but they had significant involvement within the military.
What community colleges serve Northeast Kansas besides the Kansas City Metro? Is this Highland up there? Is that in Atchison?
ACK Johnson.
Does Johnson do a lot of remote or do they do outreach? I mean, it seems like there's too many people up there for just Highland to
they're-
cover everything outside of the metro.
Johnson service area was the county. ACK service area is Wyandotte and. Yes. Now, KCK has presence in Leavenworth, the facility actually, and then it does, education and training within the prison at Leavenworth.
But everything else northeast is Highland.
I believe so. So history, okay,
Okay.
if you don't mind. In the 1980s, the Kansas State Department of Education assigned service areas. So every county was assigned to a community college except for the 5 regions counties. There's never been legislation that codified that. So we've just operated from the 80s based on the assignment by the Kansas State Department of Ed. So I can't tell you factually what Highlands counties are.
I'm just thinking geographically, if you take away the 2 Kansas City ones, there's nothing else that hits
Wow.
rural.
Wow.
Well, that's all the way Cloud is Concordia, right? mean,
Yeah.
that's quite a ways west.
Well, it is, but those counties are still assigned unless they fall KU.
You also have. Memphis County. Assigned him as district.
Right, because of KU.
Shawnee County.
You've got Barton County that's in Fort White. And then you've got Allen County that's got a location in Ottawa. That's getting done.
Okay.
What in the outshot, that's Ottawa, Allen, and Burlington,
Burlington.
no,
Coffee is Allen.
why don't we bring?
That's okay. It's not-
No, it's,
not a huge-
sorry, yeah.
That's a rabbit hole. I don't mean to take it down.
Yeah.
So,
Helpful though, for the board to see that of the assigned service areas, so we will make that happen.
I,
It's
I am not
rabbit
trying to add the rabbit hole, but that's, if you all, that's fine.
What, listen,
Fine.
it's no word. In fact, the email is to you. How that.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you, Aid.
Now, the by will, that's been,
I was noticing where some numbers it's better to be the low number and some number it's better to be the high number. It's just what graph you looked at. And everything.
Okay,
okay.
well, that's data booklet update, but if you find these meaningful, we will keep bringing you data booklets. We did want to touch bases with you on the budget. In my email that I sent out to you last week, not much has changed. We have taken the mill levy increase out of the budget model. We have left in the 3% increase in tuition and fees. We have left in the 3% compensation. We have left in the assessed valuation. We have left in $500,000 of cuts within the operating budget. We do not think we should get further in the process until we know what's going to happen in Topeka. We know that the Conference Committee of Senate Ways and Means and House Appropriations were meeting today. We have reached out collectively, the 19 community college presidents, to our legislators, asking them please to support the House bill that is only $7 more than the Senate bill. That said, we know Butler, as all other community colleges, are going to be cut. The good news and the bad news is we still got some student success funding. We still get B&I and apprenticeship funding. So those are two good things.
We still will get some capital outlay, but about $1 million.
The cut.
Yeah. Last year we got like 1.6 and this year it's, I think, about 700,000. So it's a big cut, but
So Kent has pulled up the model. We're happy to answer any questions you want. We still do not anticipate bringing you a solid recommendation on tuition and fees. Again, until we know more what the legislature is going to do, their last day is March 28th. Tomorrow is the day by which they have got to vote on bills on the floor and not risk a governor's veto. So we're hopeful we would know definitively by tomorrow. Okay, so we would be happy to answer any questions you have, or Kent will walk you through the model you see. We know the graph is not still where it needs to be, so we have work to do.
So when you send this, you're gonna send this in written, because we don't have this, do we, in print? Do we have it in print that we have already?
you have a model like this that has a 1 mil built into it. So I have not provided you with a model. This model, I'm just showing you what it looks like with that mill taken out. That's the only change from what you've seen. And like Jackie did a very good job of sort of going through the variables and, you know, one of our main topics at our recent VP meetings is, you know, what can we do to change this now? on the expenditure side.
But and to go into detail on that, we have asked the AVP to look within his or her area to see where we can achieve efficiency, where we can do without bringing harm to our students. So we still have work to do on that.
So Linda, just to follow up, I think by the next time, a month from now, obviously, we'll know what the legislature's doing. We'll have had more time to have budget discussions in VP meeting.
And then at our next board meeting, and it's earlier, isn't it?
April 8th.
April 8th. Do you think that we'll have something by then? Not spend a lot of time on it there, maybe go to the work session for more detail, but at least see it by then
But we'll be glad to give you whatever update we can.
in writing.
Sure.
Because it's hard for me if I can't have it.
In writing.
In writing.
It's
Thank
the
you.
hope that is the expectation we'll know enough to be able to approve fees and tuition at the April meeting.
Frankly, it depends, from my opinion, on how we are, what reductions in the operating budget we are able to fund. So, if not approving tuition and fees at April 8th, because we've not been able to manage the operating budget to make that model look better, then we will ask you to have a special board meeting in conjunction with your April workshop for the purpose of approving tuition and fees for next year. And Jessica has done yeoman's work to make that happen because we have already begun enrollment. And she's just done a great job at managing her team and communication plan.
And do you give them a range or you just say forthcoming or?
We were debating on their schedule. And that's not an uncommon practice.
Not, we've never done it. But in universities.
What have you heard about the Senate bill regarding affiliation? Is it gonna
Good
go anywhere?
question.
or
So
is it-
there are two Senate bills. Senate Bill 298 was the first bill, then a second bill was introduced, 293. And talking with Heather, today is Monday, and talking with Heather this last Friday, she did not think either bill would move forward.
And what did those two bills do?
Both of those bills that set the framework for mergers and affiliations. And philosophically, you know, the case, yes, if a college wanted, two colleges wanted to affiliate, but then there's some issues within both bills that would cause heartburn. So we're not supportive of either bill. That's my story.
Yeah,
I'm
Thank you.
sticking
Nope,
to
thank
it.
you.
Dr. Vietti, are they looking or trying to do that on a, because any of the school districts who have consolidated they have not consolidated by legislature. They have consolidated by their own choice.
This is, as I understand it, both bills are permissive. They include permissive language that allows it under certain conditions with approval by certain bodies.
I don't remember which one. I didn't know there was a second one. the one that I looked
I
at.
didn't either till Friday.
The question that's unanswered in the one that I read was, it just says the state will make up the tax funding that goes away, but in where is that? We don't have a surplus of money right now, so where would that money even come from if you wanted to entertain the notion? And
Well, there is that issue that it. Thinking of the savings. So the state has said in past instances, we will commit to this level of funding this many years. And in my experience, we've never achieved that optimal level of funding. So that is, I would worry about that because I don't think the state has the wherewithal financially to buy out a building. If you will.
I have a question, just a thought. Roughly, I always thought it was state paid about a third of our revenue, just say a quarter, say a quarter. But the average revenue, average cost per credit hour taught, all community colleges, $691 per credit hour. The state's spending $173 per credit hour for every community college. And they could very well just pop it off and make us all raise our rates $5 a credit hour. It could be solved just by our customer paying more instead of our neighbors. So if it went across the board, it wouldn't really hurt. I mean, we could all still generate the same revenue if we all increase. That's an average.
Referring to, as an example, a statewide levy.
No, I'm just saying if the state defunded us, we would all have to raise
Tuition.
tuition. But if we did it across the board, I mean, you go to Wendy's right now, it's $13 for a meal over there. It's ridiculous. So everybody has raised their rates higher than we have, I guess. But on a separate topic, when we're coming up on discussion of the contract renewals and increases in payroll, I would like to see, I know it's there somewhere, I haven't seen it, but their evaluations and how we keep, the level of excellence for teaching and all that. I'd like to see the unions bylaw or whatever they have.
Well, we cannot reveal personnel
No,
information.
I mean, just their policy and standards of excellence, and then I would just like to see a person read it. I may have seen it already.
Thought I sent the faculty evaluation process.
You did.
So that outlines the process.
Right.
But if there is more information, guidelines, standards, if you will, we can track those down.
does the association conduct its own evaluation of members outside of what the college does?
No, and here's why.
You
It is the law.
Well, I wouldn't be a proponent for it. I just didn't know. It happened.
Faculty members by law do not have any kind of supervisory responsibility, or they're not considered faculty. I don't want us to break the law.
No, I wasn't suggesting we should have that. I just didn't know if there was one, but okay, that makes sense. Okay.
But as part of the evaluation process, they can be observed by other faculty members, right? Yes, I think that's part of the peer review process built into the overall faculty evaluation process.
One caveat or add to that is that our adjunct faculty are typically reviewed by the chairs of the division and an observation process. So they're also through a cycle, like the first couple of years you're there, you get every semester having a review, and after you've been 2 years, you go on a different cycle where you're reviewed every 2 years.
And that is by law, right?
That is. I think the other thing I would maybe say to help you understand a little bit about the expectations of faculty. In the master agreement, there are all of the job descriptions that are in there for faculty members, leads, chairs, all of that. But lists out what their responsibilities are to classroom, to college. So that might be another way for you to look at some of those expectations of their budget.
Anything else before we open our special meeting?
Not unless we have something for us.
Actually, Shelby, you pointed out that the state provides what percentage of our funding on average?
I would always say the third, but I was just saying a quarter just so I didn't overstate it.
I'm just curious, what do our property taxes? What percentage of funding on average do they provide?
They're about the same.
I've always viewed it as a third fees, a third property tax and a third state, but that's not.
It's all part of it. You don't take our whole budget of the 80 million, just drop it.
So, like with this year, our tuition was roughly 19 million. State sources roughly 19 million. Local sources roughly 16 million.
Thanks again for all the information, Tony.
Yes. thank
And if we have nothing else, then I will call our special board meeting. Today is Monday, March 24th. We'll call that special meeting to order and begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The agenda is on the piece of paper in front. All we have is just the exec session, so would entertain a motion to. Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, that we might, we'll open for public comment, but not expecting it. But would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I move that we approve the agenda to go into exec session, or I move that we had just approved the agenda.
Trustee Good,
Yes.
trustee Brungart,
Yes.
trustee Jolly,
Yes.
trustee Rhodes.
Yes,
Trustee Hueslig,
Yes.
trustee Shear,
Yes.
trustee Smith.
Yes.
okay, that passes
Go for it,
7-0.
Dave. No, you want to.
Do we have anyone here that would like to speak for public comment? Seeing nobody. Now, motion to, and the text of that motion is on the back of the agenda. If anybody is so inclined.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I move that the board recess into executive session for discussion relating to non-elected personnel, which if discussed in open session might violate their right to privacy, to include the Board of Trustees, Angela Provart, Shelley Stoltz, and Dr. Jackie Vietti. The meeting will resume here in the Dankert trustee room within 60 minutes.
I would just add a note to that the exec session, we will be in the president's conference room. Get a second.
I did.
Second.
Okay.
Okay, trustee Good,
Yes.
trustee Brungart,
Yes.
trustee Jolly,
Yes.
trustee Rhodes.
Yes,
Trustee Hueslig,
Yes.
trustee Shear.
Yes.
Trustee Smith.
Yes.
we'll announce when we come back into open.